With us, Dr. Usman Chauhan. Now, based on all of the criteria, all of the recommendations by the FATF and Pakistan accepting more or less and abiding by more or less a lot of them, and then of course the recent 3 laws that have been passed in the Parliament as well. What are the grey areas now as far as Pakistan being moved to the white list or not are concerned? What's your take on that?
I believe that generally we have covered through legislation all of the key areas, and that is because we made amendments to previous legislation to conform to the recommendations and the technical requirements, and then we've also passed 3 important laws. And so generally I think the areas are covered. My bigger concern is about the implementation of the legislation, because if you look back at our history, even back in the 80s and 90s, we had tough ordinances. It's a question of implementation that always matters. So as far as getting onto the white list, yes, we can do that based simply on the legislation, but if we really want to have a strong money laundering, anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing regime, we will have to take measures that are more practical, which involves the cooperation of our enforcement agencies and our society, and that's a longer term evaluation.
All right, Dr. Chauhan, there's one more thing about the whole FATF, the whole concept of FATF. Who's behind it all? Is it the government that should be blamed? Is it the banking institutions that need to be blamed? As an economist, who should one point the finger at?
I think this is a very important and excellent question, because there is no culpability with any single agency or organization or person. But when I look at how money laundering is working around the world, I find that the scope of it is very, very small, if at all, in Pakistan. And the reason I'm saying that is because of the new FinCEN leaks that happened a few weeks ago. Out of $2.2 trillion worth of suspicious activity reported in those leaks through 2,000 documents, only $2 million was associated with Pakistan. 1 billion was associated with India. And that was all of their major financial institutions. And in the meantime, the largest money laundering abettors were organizations that are mainstream American and European banks. So the fact that there is so much brutality against Pakistan through the FATF simply doesn't make sense, given the proportions in the world of money laundering and terrorist financing.
All right. Dr. Niaz Murtaza, what do you have to say on this backing of the FATF and of the laws, and who needs to be blamed for this recent state in which Pakistan is? Is it really the government that needs to be blamed? Is it the government and the financial institutions that need to be blamed? Or is it also other countries' banking institutions that you feel, as per the FinCEN leaks, that have to be blamed? Usman Chauhan, you talked about those FinCEN leaks. I would like to know a bit more about those as well.
Absolutely. So there were 2,000 documents that a whistleblower leaked out, and they were studied by journalists, and they found that it's about $2.2 trillion worth of suspicious activity that was reported to a branch of the US Treasury called FinCEN.
Okay.
FinCEN keeps all these reports and then asks banks to do something if there's something wrong. That doesn't mean banks are guilty, but there was certainly something unusual that they should have done something about, and they didn't. And the scope of it is largely JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, all of these major mainstream pinstripe suited banks, and only 2 million, I mean 1 out of 1 million parts, it's a ridiculously small, trivial amount that was associated with Pakistan, and about 1 billion. That is, half of it was going money into India and coming out of India was with major Indian financial banks. So what I'm trying to argue is that in the scope of international money laundering, obviously Pakistan's economy simply isn't even large enough to do the scope of money laundering that is being seen in the world, with fancy capitals moving money around, and we are the ones being blamed. And I see this dichotomy as unusual.
All right, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, do you see this dichotomy as well, as far as the results of the FinCEN leaks is concerned? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I had said even initially, that it has a lot to do with some technical issues, but then, the political issues are always there, the international relationships and, how you get perceived internationally. And Dr. Chauhan is right that, I mean, if you look at the size of the economy and then this report that he's mentioning, I think there were about 40 institutions from India that were mentioned, including several state-owned banks and financial institutions. But obviously, there's no questioning of that. with regard to India and some of the other countries that came on top in that report. But then, it has to do a lot of to do with politics, and then also, visible things. It may not be, the money going through Pakistan that may have alarmed, the international countries, but it's just, the visible presence of, groups that are perceived to be terrorist groups. That also has a bearing on how the global institutions and the major countries view you as a threat. And I think a lot of that had to do with some very visible groups present and operating a bit openly. So then there was a crackdown on them. Some of them were proscribed. Declared as terrorist groups. Some of their leaders were also arrested. So, I mean, ultimately, the blame, whether it's done by the private institutions or by state institutions, the ultimate responsibility comes down to, the government, because it's the job of the
All
government
right,
to
you
control
said the ultimate
everything.
responsibility comes on the government, Dr. Niaz Murtaza. Let's talk about the three bills that were recently passed in the parliament amid the ruckus by the opposition that include the Anti-Money Laundering Second Amendment Bill, the Islamabad Capital Territory Waqf Properties Bill, and the Anti-Terrorism Act Amendment Bill 2020 that had been previously rejected by the Senate. That is why, of course, the joint sitting of the parliament had been convened, and they were ultimately passed amid the ruckus that happened due to the opposition. I'd like to ask you, why is the opposition creating a ruckus on all of that when we know that it is the whole country whose future is at stake with the FATF? Why don't they comply with the government in order to pass such laws forward so that Pakistan comes out of the grey list? And secondly, when we talk of international institutions or political relationship of Pakistan with other countries, how much of that relationship also has a take in the future of Pakistan's listing or not in the grey or white in the future?
Well, certainly, as I said, the government does not have, a simple majority in both houses. So obviously, it required the cooperation of the opposition. And there was a lot of back and forth. And ultimately, they had to have this joint session to, pass some of the laws. Now, I mean, there were concerns on the side of the opposition that, some of the laws have been framed or certain clauses of certain laws have been framed in a way which gives too much leeway to the government and its institutions to crack down on the opposition or on civil society. And some of those now with the opposition, you could say that maybe they had an axe to grind because of the way their cases in the accountability process with NAB and so on. But then there were also criticisms by civil society institutions, human rights organizations that some of the clauses go overboard. What FATF tells you to do is to legislate. It doesn't give you a blueprint of the type of legislation that you have to have in place, and it doesn't certainly say that you have to go overboard. So I think what was really needed was a dialogue between the government, and that's how things get resolved. In the past it has happened that even this government and opposition were able to resolve their differences and come up with joint legislation. Unfortunately, that could not happen here. But anyway, that's over and done. And now I think, as Dr. Chauhan also said, it's a question of implementation. Obviously, the immediate meeting in October will not be looking at implementation. It will look at, the adoption of the legislation and the procedures. But then if the implementation is poor in the future, and then if it's perceived again that, think these laws are not still working, then there is, obviously the chance that in the future, again, there might be questions asked about Pakistan, questions, pressure being applied. Obviously, this is not the first time that Pakistan has been on the grey list. We were there in I think 2014 or 15.
Yes.
And then we came out of it and then went back. So unless, the implementation is there, then obviously there could be questions in the future as well.
All right, all right, all right. Kindly stay online with us, Dr. Niaz Murtaza. Dr. Usman Chauhan, when we talk of legislation, implementation, all the laws that Pakistan puts on paper, and of course, despite the opposition, by the opposition, these laws are passed. One thing is to put those laws on paper. Another thing is to implement those laws. How much of a dichotomy or a difference or an issue is the implementation of all those laws that have been put on paper?
If I look at it historically, there is a strong dichotomy between the legislating and the implementation, because legislating simply means put laws on the books, but the enforcement of them is actually quite complex, involves value judgment, and it includes difference in power differential between different authorities. And what these laws are trying to do is make sure there's more coordination between them. Given the complexity of accountability and oversight in our society, with so many agencies looking over it at the federal and provincial level, I think that there will have to be at least some tussles occurring and some confrontations occurring about who has to mandate what. Now, I know the legislation tries to minimize that, but the practicalities of overseeing activity in such a large society is difficult. So I understand that implementation will also require funding, expertise, and other elements to make it feasible.
So is it a long road ahead as far as the implementation of these laws is concerned, or do you feel they can be done very smoothly and very quickly?
I believe that this will evaluate meaningfully in the long term. And that's because money is something that is not easily perceived in the banking system as we understand it. And that's why money laundering is such a vast scope internationally, that if you were to put American or Indian or other governments accountable for their money laundering, they would probably have as hard, if not harder, a task because of the way money moves, capital moves in the world today.
All right, all right. Niaz Murtaza Saab, you talked about some proscribed outfits, some organizations that the United States was not happy with, and that was indirectly one of the reasons why Pakistan was put on the grey list. Now, in the whole scenario of Pakistan complying by the rules and regulations, and you said there is a fairly good chance, 50-50 as you said, does that also move towards an improvement in the relationship between the countries behind the FATF and Pakistan?
Yeah, of course, a lot depends on that. And, things have moved on with, many of the Western countries. I mean, we are not exactly back to the situation we've had, in the early 2000s after 9/11, when Pakistan became a frontline USA ally. But I think it's, a developing relationship between Pakistan and USA. Some of, the suspicions and the mistrust has reduced, but, there is still a lot of way to go before we can say that, it's a warm two-way relationship with a lot of trust. So again, it will come back to, the way the Afghan peace process moves on. And then, of course, if it succeeds, its own implementation. And then, simultaneously, Pakistan's implementation on the specific laws. Of course, Pakistan has a poor track record, not just on these FATF-related laws, but pretty much everything. All your domestic laws, it's a mess in terms of, actual implementation. But then, obviously, most of those laws, the weak implementation does not have international repercussions for Pakistan the way, the FATF law could have. So, whatever, the general malaise in implementation, maybe within Pakistan will have to find, the institutional capacity to at least increase, the implementation capacity of those institutions which will be, directly responsible for implementing the laws related to FATF. And it will have to happen very quickly, because, since this is the second time that Pakistan has slipped back into the grey law, the leeway and, would be much less the next time, and the tolerance would be much less
next time. So Pakistan needs to comply it with very swiftly. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz Murtaza. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chauhan in the studios as well. Ladies and gentlemen, institutional capacity, swift movement of Pakistan in the right direction, and the passage of laws and the implementation of laws is the need of the hour, so that Pakistan comes out of